Welcome, everyone. I want to, welcome you again for our practitioner spotlight. This week we have Eric Seibert from Toronto. Eric's been in our program since the beginning. He started out as a specialist, out of specialist certification in 2003, and then master level certification in 2010. And I think that's just because we didn't even know what we were going to be doing for master level when the whole program started. So he probably would have been one of the first people certified at master level. Eric started teaching with us in 2011. And so basically been teaching as an instructor for MAT at all levels, from jumpstart all the way, through specialist and master level. Started that in 2011, and in 2015 he would have been in the first group of getting certified at the RX level. So Eric's a foundational MAT practitioner and instructor, and he's been a great part of this program and a part of our education. So I want to welcome you, Eric, and thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thank you. It's a great chance to have a chat.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we go way back, and early on I was teaching all the classes and developed personal relationships, and so we've been able to. We've been close for 20 years now, and so it's been pretty cool. And if you can just kind of give a little background of what got you interested in MAT, what you were doing prior to MAT, and then how it impacted your career working as an MAT.
Yeah. So my path is interesting. I started off as a strength coach and a personal trainer, and coming out of school, I was probably just typically the most educated trainer wherever I went. And so what happens when you're sometimes the more educated trainer, you get the harder clients. So I happened to work in a facility that was primarily a Nautilus facility where, they would kind of put a whole bunch of Nautilus equipment in there. And somehow, because Dr. Jones developed Nautilus, all of a sudden doctors said, oh, this is where we send injured people. So if you're not going to physical therapy, you go to the gym. And so I had all kinds of broken people coming in that I can say that I was, I just didn't hurt. I probably didn't help. I probably didn't hurt them as much as I was trying to help them, but I always felt like I was working so hard for such small results. And so after working in that population for quite a while, I switched over and I became a strength coach up here professionally with the OHL, which is a Ontario hockey program. And I was one of the first strength coaches in the OHL. And I thought, I'm going to sneak out of, injured population, general population, and I'm going to go towards elite athletics, and this is going to be so much easier. And funny enough, I found parallels where some of them at 15 to 21 years old moved as bad as some of the injured people I worked with, and I couldn't reconcile that these populations that in my mind should be so different had some kind of congruency. And so I finished working with them. I helped them build a program, and they reduced a bunch of injuries, and everything was really successful. And then I went back into general population again, and kind of went after the business side of that. I realized the strength coaching thing wasn't completely where I wanted to go. And as I came back into, again, regular populations, I was exposed to MAT very early, I guess, with one of the original people that were kind of invited to come learn MAT with you back when you decided to start to teach this. And it just fit everything that I got to get on a table, and it just fit everything that I'd never experienced myself for therapy. Like, I played football, and if you played contact sports and basketball and had my own host of injuries, I always figured my normal everyday pains and aches were something that was just a normal. Like, you played those sports, that was the price you had to pay. If you played punishment contact sports, you're going to get punished, And so some of the normal things that, as I was older and in my 20s, I just accepted having a tight back. I accepted having, I had multiple ankle injuries. I had a pars fracture in my lower spine playing football. There was a bunch of things that I just accepted. And when I got off a table the first time, having an MAT experience, I didn't feel any of those things. I felt a dramatic ability to go work out when most of my therapy experience as an athlete was you got therapized, you got kind of rolled out, you got stretched, you got beat up, and you kind of crawled off the table. Right. And you recovered and then went back to the weight room, or went to play. And so I had never had an experience where it felt like I could go play now coming off a therapy table. And so that to me was my own personal, difference between the bias I already had. And this is something different. I could train, I could lift. This was something completely different from my own personal experience. And then professionally, right away, I knew there was a place because, as I said, those early populations with general and broken people to advanced athletic elite level sports and my own experience, I thought, oh my God, this is the thing that fits in the middle that I've never had access to. This is the place between strength coaching and therapy that nobody is looking at, And so I had experienced all those things personally. I'd seen them professionally, where if you're working, you're either in the therapy room or you're in training, and everything is prepare you for sports and try and walk between those two doors back and forth. And when you're training athletes, the funny part is none of them are perfect. I mean, in the NFL, working with the NFL players as an example, they have injuries that I would say are injuries. And they say, no, that's not an injury. I'm just hurt. And I'd never even kind of put those two things together, that are you hurt or are you injured? And injured means you cannot play, cannot perform. And so I had thought those are all injuries, but at the end of the day, those are all things they can play through until they can't. Now, that's generally what those populations are dealing with, whether you're an actual regular person, they just don't measure anything. So lots of us can't do activities of daily living. We just don't know it until we try and do them. Right. And so this is where I felt professionally I had to go. And then once I started, dedicating myself to MAT, I saw answers after answers that I was never going to find. All of a sudden I wasn't working a mile for an inch. I was working an inch for a mile. And so that professionally shifted a huge amount of opportunities for me. And the road has just kept going up and up and up ever since. So.
That's great. And it's funny, a couple of things you said there. I mean, I think back when I was a strength and conditioning at Fresno State, a strength and conditioning coach at Fresno State, and there was a gap between the training room and the strength and conditioning side of it. If they were injured, they went to the training room, and once they got healthy enough to play, then they could come back and work out. And there wasn't a lot of interrelationships between the trainers and the strength coaches. I think that's evolved a lot over the years. I mean, that was 1985 when I started there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. These are, we're old in this, we're old now, but the fact that those things have come so far, and funny enough, in some cases, MAT, in some of the cases I've been able to introduce, a whole different mindset to some of those programs, whether it's the Blue Jays or the Raptors or, the Buffalo Bills, or, that there's a number of people that said, yeah, there is a gap, and whether it's Major League Baseball, I've done work with Boston Red Sox. I've done, work with California Angels. These are all programs that have said, yeah, there's a missing piece, and we don't have enough ways to gather data. So I think that for the right person, I think we're going to get to that conversation about our future, students, but for the right person that sees there's a missing piece, that's where most of our students are probably going to, kind of find their way to be successful. Like they can get some answers from MAT.
Yeah, that was one of the things when I finished my master's program. I mean, the emphasis in exercise science, and I really didn't know, what am I going to do with my life? I really didn't know what that master's degree gave me the credentials for. And the real world, I mean, as a strength and conditioning coach, it was like, okay, I'm in the field. But some of the things, even that, what I was learning at night in the master's program compared to what I was doing in the day, where like there was a disconnect there between the two processes. But literally I came out of it, and then you see, and people that I graduated with, I mean, you go out and you become a physical therapy aide or assistant, or many people went back and got their PhD to teach and do research. And there wasn't really a lot of opportunity. I mean, I have many friends with a master's degree in the exercise science world that it finally got to the point where they went back and went to physical therapy school. And so there was a missing link. And that's kind of what I feel like MAT brings to this population is opportunity. We specialize in the muscular system, and the muscle system's role relative to chronic pain and injury, but also how it can enhance performance. I mean, it's allowed us to separate ourselves in an industry that was kind of limited. And I think, I mean, you just talked about, I mean, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Buffalo Bills, and all these different organizations in professional sports. I mean, back doing what you were doing in the strength and conditioning side of it, working with athletes and then the general population, do you feel like that opportunity, it was there in the state you were in?
No, no. I mean, you could look at, I mean, the most obvious is that no, not a chance. There's not much of a chance. In those fields, you have to be doing something. You have to be doing something sensational. You know, you have to be doing something different. It is a challenge sometimes doing something different because they don't know how to where to put you. You know what I mean? Our tool is kind of creating an opportunity for something, but that also means that the established people on the rungs, you know, kind of have to understand how to utilize you. You know, that's a whole different battle. We could talk about that for an hour, but you know, the difference for us, there's no opportunity. There's also no upward financial opportunity. You know, I was already I walked out of the personal training industry. Strength coaching is by salary, and you know, there's only so many jobs in that direction, and usually those jobs you're trying to get back into commercial stuff anyway. So professionally, you're trying to almost use that ladder to jump off and make yourself a bigger opportunity somewhere else. There's lots of NHL strength coaches that have done that. But staying a strength coach for life, you're getting a salary and whatever, you know, being an NFL strength coach for life, you're getting a pension, you're getting a good thing, but there is a limit of what you're really going to do. Creating this opportunity for myself, I keep kind of shifting into all those directions. And I walked out at personal training at probably the highest, you know, per hour rate that you would probably have. You know, I walked out at a level that most people don't make now, right, and walked away from personal training. And so, you know, I'm happy to say I charge $250 an hour and people are very happy to pay it. I was never getting that to be a personal trainer. I was never getting that kind of wage to be a strength coach. You know, you would have had to leverage a whole bunch of other opportunities to create businesses to represent that kind of financial opportunity. So no, I very easily can represent that price tag and not ever apologize for it, you know, based on the results I get, the amount of people I see, the amount of people I help, you know. So yeah, MAT's given me that opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. I mean, with MAT, I've always said the proof is in the pudding, and with the idea that, I mean, if you think of conventional rehabilitation and insurance coverages, that there's not a lot of accountability when it comes to, I mean, it's changed with managed care here in the United States, and insurance companies aren't as free, I guess, with the money. But early on, I mean, people could go and get, I just need 12 more visits. The doctor rewrites a prescription, and they just kept going to physical therapy. And it never really, there wasn't the accountability of, are they getting better? And it was, well, we'll just pay for the service. And I remember working with a group of physical therapists in Fresno, and I was in a cash-based business. And they were like, man, I don't know if I was back then, and this is in the early 90s, they were like, I don't know if my clients would pay me over $100 an hour for the services I provide. And where they knew that they could bill it with insurance, and insurance would pay for it. But in reality, when with MAT, most practitioners have cash-based businesses, and all the way to $200, $300, $400, all the way to $600 an hour. I mean, and if you don't provide a service that people recognize as valuable, they're not going to pay it. I mean, insurance companies aren't covering services, and so literally they may come once and never come back unless they see the value of the service. And that's where I say the proof is in the pudding with MAT. We've had so many practitioners that have been able to open cash-based business, and even therapists and trainers that are chiropractors that have gone from insurance-based businesses and been able to switch over to cash-based businesses and not have to deal with the hassles of insurance companies and insurance regulations. And so it definitely, it's neat that it provides opportunity, but the only reason it provides opportunity is because there's value to it. And if you give it that, people will pay for value, and you can't put a price on health. That's one of the things I've seen over the years is some of the wealthiest people I've had as clients, if they're not healthy, it doesn't matter how much money they have, that if they're not healthy and can't enjoy everyday life, they're not happy. And so that's the value that we want to bring from an MAT standpoint to our clients.
Yeah, there's a funny saying, a native saying, Aboriginal saying up here is that man with health has 1,000 wishes. Man with no health has one wish. So,
Good point. And it's funny, one of the things you said when you started out the conversation, working with the general public and injured people when you were working with Nautilus, is it's literally, I mean, when you set people up on exercise conventionally that are injured, they say somebody comes in with a herniated disc or they just had a knee replacement. I mean, you spend your time hoping that what you do with them exercise wise is not going to irritate them and make them feel worse. So the whole goal you have of them coming out of their exercise is that you just didn't make them worse. And one of
really high bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Really high bar. I hope I don't hurt this person.
And one of the things that we used to see, especially from the training, strength and conditioning side, when athletes were injured, like we talked about, they'd go to the training room, and then when they're healthy, they'd come back. But even in the general public, if somebody went skiing or they overdid it on a weekend, they'd call up and say, oh, I can't come in and do my workout today because I tweaked my knee or I tweaked my back. And it's neat to see now from an MAT perspective is now, hey, I went out and skied this weekend and I tweaked my back. I need to get in and see you, because they know that they overloaded their muscle system, which led to their pain, and now they got to get put back together, and they can actually feel better. So rather than avoiding sessions with the practitioners, it's actually in desperation. I need to get in and get some help, and that's a whole unique. I mean, that's a paradigm shift in thought process. And again, we've both seen that with MAT. I mean, people, I get emergency calls saying, hey, I need to get in to see you because I tweaked my back or knee or whatever, and we're just training them. Maybe, hey, I can't see you today because I'll see you in a week.
Time is money, and you just lost time, right? So, yeah, it's interesting to see the clients that are now, focused on, like, I'm trying to get people off my table. I'm trying to get people out. I said, there's a lineup behind you, and so when you think of a presentation like that, paradigm shift for a practitioner that's in a cash business, it's like, wait, there's people lining up. Like, I gotta get you out, and people are like, can I stay? It's like a very different versus, okay, well, we got to keep you for another 20 sessions. And the person feels like, well, I'm not paying for this, but I don't feel very much value. And so, yeah, those are all massive shifts in the MAT world where, you can see people come in and feel, even to be honest, from my own sense, feeling great about what you do. Sometimes I'm talking all the time anyway, and I never stop talking. And somebody says, I don't really know what you said, but I wish I felt that way about my job. Like, you obviously love your job. You're obviously really engaged. And, the amount of feedback I get from, myself or for other staff of people that just say, wow, I just can't believe I understand my body this much better. I understand how invested you are, and I understand how passionate you are. And, I realize you're actually trying to get me out of here. It's a real, like, that's value right there. And so, that's the person that sends me their whole family. That's the person that sends me their grandmother. That says, hey, my kids are having trouble. Can you come? Can I get them in to see you? So I don't have to convince people to stay. I'm like trying to get them out because there's more coming in.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest key. Like people will say, "How much marketing do you do?" And it's like the greatest seller of MAT in the process. If you're a good practitioner, is word of mouth, and that's
Yeah.
how you build a business. Is I mean, just you make someone feel good, they tell their whole family, and the next thing you know, like you said, you have a waiting list, and people can't get in, and that's again supply and demand. But if the supply is not good, you don't have the demand. If the supply is good, then I mean, if you provide a great service, then you'll get the demand, and that's what we've seen with our top MAT practitioner. They're not out there knocking doors down trying to build a clientele. They're actually, again,
No.
the proof is in the pudding. They're actually proving their worth with every client that walks in the door. And the problem
Yeah.
you said earlier is then what happens is then they send up their most screwed up family members, and then
Yeah.
the whole
Gauntlet.
yeah, now all of a sudden it gets more complicated, and that's literally what led to the RX level. You're certified at the RX level and the highest level of education, because the basic level of MAT, which is such a powerful tool, it has limitations when you start seeing these, neurological nightmares, if you want to say, where their system is just stressed and inflamed, and found maybe the straightforward principles of biomechanics and muscle relationship to injury is a little more in depth and a little more complicated. And the RX program is designed to help these people. I say it's a neuromuscular overhaul. It literally just reprograms their whole nervous system, movement by movement, muscle by muscle, to raise their tolerance level of their muscle system so they can start enjoying everyday life. And it's just an advance. I always say it's MAT on steroids. And I would have never known when back in 2003, when you were going through the program, where I said that I didn't even have a master level program planned out. And not
Yeah.
only did it turn into master level, but through experience and frustrations, it ended up leading all the way to this RX process, which is, just the epitome of the MAT education program. And you've been
Yeah.
around for it all. You've seen a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to think I was at your very first mastery class, right? The very first. And I think we were doing some not nerve flossing, but it was almost like some overstretch type something, which funny enough has some stress, like something was still there way back then, all the way to now, in a very different way. But there was some part of that you were still kind of working your way through, even as back as far as whatever 2000, whatever it was, 4 or 5 or something. And so the interesting thing is to see the development. And usually I think we did that, Aaron and I and Charlie did that sort of talk for everybody in the community, a community question thing. And I'd said, one of the things about the education is your clients are going to lead you into more education. The client cases you get, like if you're specialist level, that's great. You just do a CEC and fine. If you're really successful, you're doing great. But typically as you get more successful, sure enough, out comes the gauntlet and somebody brings you and the back people find a harder back person, or the bad hip person finds an even worse hip person for you to look at. And very often it's that I need to go get more education. Not I'll be successful when I get more education. It's like I'm really good, but then somebody is introducing a new variable, a new challenge to me, and I'm not good enough for this. And so that feeling of the return on investment is directly related to client results. I think sometimes people chase education backwards, like your people that are getting all this education, your physical therapy friends that are, more education and a master's and a PhD, and they're like, but I still don't have a job,
Right.
So it's like they're getting education hoping a job will show up, versus us where it's like I keep getting more education because I have jobs waiting for me to do. And so it always becomes easier in my mind to keep learning with real people involved, with a real job waiting for you, where that person feels like, oh my gosh, the education is paying off right away. Right. And I think that's sort of, as you see people getting more complex cases, it's like, yeah, the natural progression of your client list is getting heavier. This is where education becomes, it fits perfectly into what most people will see, in terms of what's going to be on your table.
Yeah. It's the real world. I mean, you can
Yeah.
you can read things in a book that all make sense and have scientific rationale behind them, but then you get thrown into the real world, and literally, like I've started to say with the biomechanics earlier, with these stressed clients, when you add an immune system and a nervous system to a biomechanical system, you can throw everything you know about muscle function out the door, because with systems are overly stressed and they can't tolerate forces, you could say these are the best exercises for these muscles and this muscle group, but those exercises could be the worst thing possible for that person relative to the state of their neurological system or neuromuscular.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you said you charge $250 an hour, and I think
Mhm.
you have to agree is you get paid $250 a day, an hour, to learn. Because every
Yeah.
client that walks in the door is a learning opportunity. And like you
Yeah.
said, the last hip person I had, I mean, well, it was just straightforward. They had some hip rotation issues. We got those muscles working, their motion improved, the stability improved, and their pain went away. And then somebody comes in, and I say, every time you think you have it figured out, somebody walks in and blows away every thought process that you have. And then you have to regroup, and you have
Yeah.
to go back to the
This is
basics.
why we lose our hair, Greg. This is why we lose our
Yeah, we all had hair at the beginning of this.
hair.
Okay. But every client is the opportunity to learn, and you know my story with the client that I had that was paralyzed, and
Yeah.
now he's swinging golf clubs, living a life, and everything. I mean, an extreme story. But when he was sent to me, I mean, literally, I told him, I have faith, but I'm going to learn from you. I know this is a learning opportunity. And I had so many frustrations because I saw someone's body at the most dysfunctional state it could possibly be in. And his body, like, he couldn't compensate for his inabilities or instabilities. Sure. And so his body showed me things that I would have never seen on an athlete or even the general population, because they can still compensate for their imbalances. That's how people still live life, with all the muscular dysfunctions they have. But he wasn't living, he was in a wheelchair and paralyzed from the waist down. So his body showed things that most bodies didn't. But then it was interesting because I learned so many things off of him, but that transferred into every single client. I'm like, at the most extreme case, he showed how the body functions or doesn't function in the most dysfunctional state. But those same adaptations and compensations happen to a degree at all levels, all the way to the professional athlete level. And so again, an example of every client can be a learning opportunity. And they have to trust you. They have to have the patience, and they have to trust you. But this whole idea, I think the role of muscle function in health and pain-free living has been, I mean, underestimated forever, from the rehabilitation and the pain management side of it.
Oh yeah. Well, the constant is typically taught, certainly up here, muscles are stupid, right? There's a pretty common concept, right? And it's like, oh, nerves control muscles, or alignment at the spine controls muscles, or muscles can turn on and off, or we can just punch muscles or electrocute muscles or do all these things. And I always kind of use like muscles as fuses instead of, because I said, well, look, you can turn them on and off. I said, but what if the capacity is the problem? Right. So, you reboot everything and the body goes, great, still at 5 amp fuse and should be at 40. So as soon as you turn everything on, start walking, and it breaks down again. So if you don't have a system in place to deal with that, the size of the fuse or the dedicating of the wires, I think of RX kind of like that, like dedicating the house again. Like, you ring the doorbell and the bathroom on the 3rd floor flushes and the back door light turns on, and you're like, how did that turn out? Like, what, but meanwhile, the body said, well, this is how I had to wire it together to make it work. And so it's like rededicating those rooms to their own spaces. Like, the dining room should be the dining room. If you go down to your fuse panel, it should say dining room, and then all those fuses should look dedicated, And so if you pull the panel apart, it's like the wires are all going into each other every time you turn on that lamp. No wonder the washing machine flush, it starts, and you're like, what? This is all organized badly. So
it's disorganization of the nervous system.
So that's what I say. It's more like organizing the panel, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's at the RX level. Typically when people come in chronically stressed, I mean, that's the first thing I say, they have disorganized nervous system. And the
Yeah.
first thing we want to do is bring organization to the nervous system, because if you don't start rewiring and get everything going to the right room or the right direction. So literally I say movement by movement, muscle by muscle, we're creating that organization through this RX process.
Yeah.
Obviously that's the advanced level of MAT.
But even with MAT as at a high level, a mastery level, you know, I'm looking at this and these are correlating motions and, you know, these are things that would go together. And then you're like back to treating TVA again.
Yeah.
You know, or they've done isometrics, or you've done, you know, their training, or and you're back to treating TVA again. And you're like, you know, how is this something that has to show up all the time? And so that's where, again, the client is interested in showing you, you know, how to learn, that your skill set has to get better because they're demonstrating something that, you know, says you don't have the right answer. You can make a change, it just doesn't last.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the key. I mean, it's neat to hear your stories, your background. I mean, you have, again, since 2003, the experience. I mean, every person that walks in the door is another opportunity to learn and think about where you were. One of the things that I say, you hear me every class, every 6 months, I look back and say, man, I didn't have a clue 6 months ago. And the reason is because you just had 6 months more of experience, and that experience is what creates stimulation and inquisitiveness to say, man, why, okay, this didn't work and let me try this. And how many times do you look back in that manner and say, God, I wish I had that one client back, like that came in that what frustrated me 6 months ago, because now I think I've figured out what I was missing back then. And that's happened. I mean, as long as I've been doing this 25, 30 years, I thought at some point in time, we're going to have it completely figured out, but we don't understand the nervous system and muscle system, the muscular system, the way we would hope.
Yeah.
We can
There's one that sometimes happens to me is you get a client that you saw maybe 5 years ago, and for whatever reason, they pop back in your schedule and you remember them as a harder client.
Yeah.
And then you work on them. You're like, oh, it's right here. Like I remember this being, you know, like this person's really simple. Like, and it was just 5 years ago, your thought process or the way you understand stuff or your testing level, all those things have gone up. And so it's not, sometimes I have gotten that person back and I'm like, yes.
Exactly. And that's, you've heard me say it in classes. I mean, everybody wants to be at the highest level, and people that are starting out right at the MAT level. And it's like, man, after the first weekend of classes, they go back and have success because they're looking at the body in a completely different manner that no one really looks at people through this neuromuscular process that we've defined with MAT. But these people see, oh, there's all this, the master level and the RX level, and even from the basic foundational jumpstart level, it's like people have had success. And so we can never minimize the most basic foundational principles that come with MAT. But people always see what else is out there at the treatment level, but that takes time and energy. So one of the things you hear me say in class is, you're only as good as what you know now. But be comfortable with what you know now, because it's a powerful tool that you've been, taught, and you can make so much with it. Don't worry about what you don't know. Be comfortable with what you know, because with what you do know, you can still have great amounts of success with your clients immediately.
Yeah. I mean, there's people that finish the first weekend of the specialist program and are like, my mom's back pain has gone away, and my mom didn't tell me a frozen shoulder and it's moving. And you're like, you didn't even treat the shoulder, so there's all kinds of things that if people think, oh, the answer must be somewhere else, and I had a student that had it was a jumpstart student of all things way back when, and he was a strength coach, and he missed lower body. He started in upper body and then took trunk and spine just based on where the dates fell, and he got given an athlete who had crippling shin splints, a volleyball player that basically had bilateral shin splints that were so terrible that they couldn't play, they could show up, they could barely practice, and it was almost going on to the second season. And the coach heard of him doing something. He was in the volleyball community of Quebec, and they said, listen, would you be willing to look at this athlete? And he was like, I heard this after the weekend I'd given him. And he said, I didn't even have legs. Like I thought, oh gosh, what am I going to do? He goes, well, okay, I'll be willing to look. Well, he looked at her shoulders and he looked at her trunk and spine based on the tools he had. Lo and behold, no shin splints. He didn't treat legs, but because he didn't have the tool. And so he was like, oh my God, well, I'll work with what I have. Sure enough, it was a trunk and spine problem. Nobody was ever looking at her trunk and spine. They were just bombing away on her legs. And, so he used the tools he had. And funny enough, instead of worrying about what he didn't have, which was sort of in the background of, oh my God, I'm not even looking at her lower body.
Right.
All of a sudden the problem presents itself. So, those stories I could tell 50 of those type of stories off the top of my head,
Yeah, and that's one of the things. I mean, you don't come from a licensed degree program. I don't have the license to diagnose or treat pain, and the majority of our practitioners don't. And so, and that's actually a good thing. Because most people that have the license to treat pain are focusing on the pain, and really the foundational principles of MAT is where you have limitations in range of motion. It means that one or more of the muscles that cross that axis are potentially weak. And if they're weak, the first sign of neuromuscular dysfunction or weakness is tightness. The second sign is it shouts out in pain saying, fix the problem. And that pain can come from anywhere. And so like you just said, I mean, it's like they treat the trunk or shoulder on somebody and their lower leg shin splints goes away. It's like sometimes you can't even make sense of why it had a positive effect, but the foundational principle was, hey, they're limited, say, in trunk rotation. That their body's compensating for that. That may be putting increased stress on other joints and tissues. Let's address what the body's showing rather than what it's screaming out in, and that's pain. And let's show what the body's showing is its dysfunction and not chase pain. And I think that's a great part of what makes it unique and why people can get results that other people haven't gotten results with, because we're just looking at it from a completely different perspective.
Yeah, this big holistic picture of let's look at all of you, right? And that generally is what I'm saying to clients when they come in as a practitioner is like, look, you've already done, most of the time they've done other stuff. By the time they get to me, they're kind of circling the drain by the time they get to me. I've tried this. And so for me, that produces an opportunity to say, look, are you willing to look at this differently? Are you willing to look at, I'm going to look at all of you. Yeah. I know what your problem is and I know what your focus is. And trust me, I understand that, but I'm going to look at all of you as part of a set of solutions, because the people that have already looked where the pain is, have already done that. So the puzzle doesn't get solved from that end. If you're the tail wagging the dog, it doesn't seem to work out so well, and if they were going to help you, they would have done it already,
Yeah, years ago, there was a kicker for the Denver Broncos. He had strained a groin, and he came in, and I go in on Wednesdays and Fridays. So he had a couple of days. He strained it in the game. So Wednesday morning, he comes in, and he's like, the trainer sent him to me, and he's like, I can't have anyone dig into my groin anymore.
Oh, yeah.
All they've done for 2 days, and it's so sore. He could barely weight bear on that leg. And I'm like, the great thing is we're not going to look at it. They're specialists in treating the injuries, and we're going to look at it from a mechanical standpoint or a muscular standpoint. And literally, he had some trunk rotation issues. And this is 15 years ago, and he had these trunk rotation limitations and treated his core, and he stood up and he could go through kick his leg. And it was like, wow, you didn't even touch my groin. And again, it was,
please don't touch my groin.
There's a problem. Yeah. And so that's the nice part about it. And the key is it's not competition, or it's not taking the place of anything else. It's an adjunct. It provided an environment so that tissue could heal. And then the things that people are doing from a therapeutic standpoint, it just enhances the results from the other therapies. And so that's the one thing I've always said about MAT is, I don't even have to say it's better than anything out there, but I do know it has its place. It has its place in the industry, all the way from the pro sport, high level athletes, all the way to the most dysfunctional people, to the point where somebody was in a wheelchair and paralyzed from the waist down and has function. And the one thing you've heard me say many times is, who's MAT for? Everybody, anyone that has a muscular system. Life's going to beat us up. And from a neuromuscular standpoint, somebody's got to be there to put you back together. And that's what we do with MAT. And so I think from that standpoint, I mean, as an instructor, as a practitioner since 2003, basically 23 years or 20 years, sorry.
Yeah.
With the idea, I mean, what would you, if you had insight to future potential students, what would your thought be of anybody dealing with the health, exercise and rehabilitation industries? What would your thoughts be to them to say, give them insight on MAT?
Well, so a lot of the sometimes I would think of it like the Matrix, if you've seen the Matrix, and it's kind of like, if you think there's another story out there, it's kind of funny. Like, it's not going to appeal to everybody. You know, some people that are salaried employees, and if there's Canada's a little different because you've got socialized healthcare. Sometimes the salaried employees are like, hey, you want me to learn more but not get paid more? It's a different, it's right away, you're going to see the wall drop off. But if they have their own business, if they are in the world of, even with insurance, that type of thing, but they're being, you know, they have their own business and they're looking for, you know, answers, or they're like me or like you or like the physical therapy people we know that say, you know what, there seems to be, like, I'm just chasing my tail the whole time. That's kind of where that sense of, if you think there's another story out there, there is. It's just the people that are looking for something else, you know. MAT is a tool, just like anything else. I say to people all the time, I'm just a really good screwdriver. You know, it doesn't mean wrenches don't work, right? It doesn't mean, you know, it's just, but screwdrivers, when you need one, is a really good tool. If you try and put a screw into the wall with a nail, you know, it's like screwdrivers don't work on nails, but screwdrivers work on screws. Hammers and screws, like, oh, it sort of works, right, but it's better when you do that. So it's almost like when you realize, when you think there's another tool, or there must be a tool for this, that's the group of people that we'd be speaking to. You know, whether that's a strength coach, a personal trainer, you know, I can't stretch these people enough. This person's always tight. This person is always going to therapy, and I know I'm training them, but they're hurt, but they're not injured, but they're hurt, and I need more tools. You know, that's kind of who I was, and so that sense of need to gather more information. I need to show results. I need to help people that are injured. I need to help people perform better. Those are all the people in those. If you're identifying with those characters, yeah, you're looking at MAT as a potential powerful tool that differentiates you from everyone else. Right? If you want to talk about job security, do something better than somebody else. Do something different. Everybody is stretching people. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but if you keep doing it and it doesn't work, then why are we still doing it? You know, for the people that, the people that like stretching, great. The people that are going to do it, no problem. If you say, I hate stretching, but we have to stretch, or I'm supposed to stretch you, and range of motion is a big deal, part of fitness, and yet somehow you're never getting range of motion. Like, you know, if you're wondering, there's got to be another answer. It's like, oh, there is. It's just put a different filter on and look at their body this way in this holistic practice. And all of a sudden you have a way of helping. I can become super trainer. I can assess, I can steer towards or away from things. I can turn things back on, choose to exercise them, choose not to. I can orchestrate choices in prescriptive exercise, corrective exercise. I can avoid certain stuff if I needed to. You know, I can direct specifically to all kinds of other practitioners, Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, move in this direction, try and train in this plane, whatever. There's tons of information I can gather. And so if you become an adjunct to all those other people, those people then say, I'm going to send you business. And so, you know, if it's a financial thing, yeah, I think it's in there, but I don't think that usually drives most of us. It's mostly the knowledge thing. I think most people, the bonus is you're going to get paid better to do something that nobody else is doing. Money and creating, you know, solving a problem that no one else can solve. That's really, if you're bugged by this problem, then yeah, I think MAT would really help a lot of people. And then the bonus is I'm happy at what I do. I feel like I'm adding value to people's lives. I'm getting results no one else is getting. You know, I feel professionally fulfilled, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Starting in 2003 and being able to say this almost 20 years later, I love what I do. I love going to work, and it's all I talk about. I mean, that's a great representation, and basically, I mean, great support for the process that you committed to almost 20 years ago. So thank you for being a part of the process. Thank you for being an instructor, and it's been great to have you as part of the program. And I look forward. We got many years to keep this.
Yeah. Okay, bud. Take it easy. Goodbye, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks.